Rain poured relentlessly over Riverview that night. The kind of cold, steady rain that seemed to wash the world in grey. The streets glistened beneath flickering streetlights, and the usually busy Henderson Plaza Mall was nearly deserted. The mall's massive parking garage, 6 levels of concrete and shadows, was quiet except for the rhythmic drip of water seeping through cracks in the ceiling. The few cars that remained gleamed under the dim fluorescent lights, their windshields streaked with rain and dust. It was close to 10 o'clock when Clara Devine drove in. Clara was 32, a nurse at the county hospital who had just finished a long double shift. Her eyes were tired, her scrubs damp from the drizzle, and her shoulders ached from hours of work. She had parked in the same garage almost every night, always on the 4th level, near the exit ramp. That spot felt safe, close to the cameras and bright enough that she could see her reflection in the puddles that gathered near the drains. She didn't know that this night, her routine would betray her. The security cameras caught her arrival at 9:47 p.m. Her silver sedan rolled into frame, tires slicing through the shallow pools of rainwater. She parked, turned off the engine, and sat for a moment, rubbing her temples as the wipers froze mid-swipe. Then she reached for her bag and phone, unaware that her every move was being recorded and watched by someone else. On the other side of the garage, a dark SUV pulled in just a few minutes later. Its headlights stayed on longer than usual before finally dimming. The driver was Ethan Ward, a 35-year-old software engineer who lived nearby. He often came to the mall's late-night gym to unwind after work. He was familiar to the staff and occasionally chatted with Clara in the elevator or near the parking lot. On the surface, there was nothing unusual about his arrival, but the camera footage showed something odd. After Ethan's SUV entered, there was a momentary flicker in the feed, just half a second, but enough to suggest interference. When the image returned, the view seemed subtly different, as though the angle had shifted. Security later confirmed no maintenance work had been done that evening. Still, no one thought much of it then. At 10:05 p.m., an ear-piercing car alarm shattered the silence. The echo bounced between the concrete walls, startling the only person on duty that night, Lance Hooper, the mall's overnight security guard. Lance had been sipping coffee and scrolling through his phone in the control room when the alarm light began flashing red. He grabbed his flashlight and jogged toward the 4th level, his boots splashing through shallow puddles. When he reached Clara's car, he found the driver's door wide open. Her bag was on the ground, its contents scattered. Lipstick, ID badge, and a set of house keys lying near a small pool of water, tinged pink under the flickering lights. Her phone screen glowed faintly, still unlocked. The only sound was the steady beeping of the car alarm. There was no sign of Clara. Lance called it in immediately, his hands shaking as he described the scene. Police arrived within minutes, sealing off the entire level with yellow tape. The storm had intensified by then, thunder rolling across the valley. The detectives took photos of everything. The car, the puddles, the single red shoe lying near the drain. The rain washed away traces of blood, if any had been there. The security footage offered little help. Clara's movements seemed ordinary until the final moments before the camera glitched. For 12 seconds the feed went black. When it returned, her car door was open and she was gone. No one was seen leaving on foot. No other vehicles were captured on camera during that time frame. It was as if she had simply vanished into the rain. By midnight, word of the disappearance had reached the local news. Reporters gathered outside the garage as police searched nearby streets and waterways. Friends and co-workers described Clara as kind, responsible, and cautious. Someone unlikely to take risks or wander off without reason. The police found no signs of a struggle, no witnesses, and no explanation. The next morning, her empty car sat in the impound lot, droplets still clinging to its surface. Investigators combed through every inch, collecting fingerprints and fibers, but the evidence raised more questions than answers. Who had triggered the alarm? Why had the cameras glitched? And most chilling of all, where had Clara gone in the few seconds between the last frame of the video and the moment the alarm began to scream through the rain-soaked garage? It was the beginning of a mystery that would haunt Riverview for years to come. The morning after Clara Devine's disappearance, Riverview woke to grey skies and restless whispers. The parking garage at Henderson Plaza Mall was surrounded by yellow tape, patrol cars, and flashing lights. Shoppers stood behind barricades, watching as investigators moved in and out with cameras and evidence bags. The eerie emptiness of the garage seemed heavier in daylight, every shadow now holding suspicion. What had once been an ordinary structure of concrete and steel had become the scene of a mystery no one could explain. Detective Mira Coulson arrived just before 9. She was methodical, calm, and known among her colleagues for solving difficult cases by noticing the smallest details. She stepped out of her car, notebook in hand, and took a slow look around the garage. The smell of damp concrete and engine oil hung in the air. Rainwater dripped rhythmically from the ceiling, forming thin streams that wound their way toward the drains. Nothing looked disturbed, except for the empty parking space where Clara's car had been found. Mira walked the perimeter carefully. The 4th level was open on both sides, providing a view of the surrounding streets. There were security cameras on every corner, but one, the one aimed directly at Clara's car, had a faint burn mark around its lens. The technician confirmed it wasn't caused by heat but by an electrical surge. Something or someone had tampered with the feed. When Mira replayed the footage from the control room, the timeline was clear. Clara arrived at 9:47 p.m. and was seen gathering her things. Then at 9:53, a faint shadow appeared near the far wall. It was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a hooded jacket. The figure lingered at the edge of the frame, then moved toward Clara's car, and the screen cut to static for 12 long seconds. When it came back, she was gone. The first person Mira questioned was Lance Hooper, the security guard who'd discovered the scene. He looked uneasy, his uniform still damp from the night before. He described what he saw: the open door, the scattered belongings, the red shoe. He insisted he had checked all exits immediately after the alarm, but had found no one. Mira noted the nervous tapping of his fingers on his flashlight. It wasn't guilt she saw in his face, but fear. He seemed genuinely shaken, though his story didn't explain why the cameras had glitched or how anyone could have vanished so quickly. By midday, Clara's family had arrived. Her younger sister, pale and trembling, told the officers that Clara had called her during her drive home, but hung up after saying she thought someone was following her. The call had lasted less than a minute. Police traced the signal and confirmed it originated from the parking garage area, but the phone had stopped transmitting soon after. Detectives began reviewing every car that had entered or exited the garage between 9 and 10 that night. Only 3 had left after Clara's arrival. One belonged to Ethan Ward, the software engineer who often parked near her. The second was a janitor finishing his shift. The third used a stolen license plate registered to a vehicle that had been reported missing 2 weeks earlier. That discovery sent a ripple of unease through the investigation. Whoever had driven that car was their only true unknown. When Mira visited Ethan's apartment that evening, he appeared startled but cooperative. He admitted knowing Clara, describing her as friendly and kind. He explained he'd gone to the gym, parked 2 spaces away from her, and left shortly after finishing his workout. He swore he saw nothing unusual, yet his fingerprints were found on the handle of Clara's car door. He explained that away by saying he'd once helped her load groceries into her trunk weeks ago. It was plausible, but it didn't feel right. Back at the station, Mira studied the caseboard. A printed still from the footage showed the faint outline of the hooded figure. The height and build didn't match Ethan. The stolen car, however, offered another path. Traffic cameras in Riverview were limited, but one camera downtown caught the car speeding away at 10:12 p.m., heading toward the old industrial district. The license plate number blurred in the rain, but the shape of the vehicle, a dark sedan, matched descriptions from witnesses near the mall. By the end of the day, detectives had combed through every level of the garage, drained nearby storm grates, and examined the stairwells for traces of blood or fabric. Nothing surfaced. No DNA, no shoe prints, no signs of a struggle. It was as though the rain had washed the night clean. Still, something in the air felt unfinished. Mira stood once more at the scene before leaving. The sound of dripping water echoed in the emptiness. She glanced at the camera mounted above her, the one that had failed at the worst possible moment, and wrote a note in her book: tampering deliberate, not random. As the sun dipped behind the clouds, she could feel it in her gut. Someone had planned this. Clara Devine hadn't simply vanished by chance. Someone had known exactly how to make her disappear, and how to make it look like she was never there at all. A week passed, and Riverview seemed to breathe in whispers. Flyers with Clara Devine's smiling face were taped to streetlights and shop windows. Her disappearance dominated the news, but the police had no solid lead. The town, once calm and predictable, now felt uneasy after dark. People who once parked in the Henderson Plaza garage began avoiding it altogether. Even the employees who worked late requested escorts to their cars. Something about the place felt cursed, haunted by a mystery too recent to fade. Detective Mira Coulson hadn't slept properly since the night of the disappearance. She spent her days reviewing surveillance footage, witness statements, and forensic reports, but the puzzle refused to come together. Then, on the 7th morning, a new piece appeared. A sanitation worker found a cell phone lodged in a storm drain 2 blocks from the garage. It was water damaged, but still intact enough for the tech team to recover some data. When Mira arrived at the lab, the phone was already logged into evidence. It belonged to Clara. The last outgoing call on the device was made at 9:49 p.m. on the night she vanished. It was to Ethan Ward. The duration of the call was 43 seconds. The timestamp placed it minutes before the camera feed glitched. Mira's pulse quickened as she stared at the record. Clara had tried to reach Ethan right before she disappeared. When questioned again, Ethan admitted the call had happened. He said she told him she needed to talk about something important, and that she sounded anxious. He had assumed it was about work or a personal issue, so he agreed to meet her later, but she never arrived. His voice trembled slightly when he said this, though Mira couldn't tell if it was grief or guilt. Meanwhile, attention turned toward Lance Hooper, the mall's night security guard. His initial statement had matched the timeline, but new information painted a more complicated picture. Mall management confirmed that Lance had been reprimanded twice in the past year for neglecting his patrol duties and once for stealing electronics from unclaimed lost and found items. When detectives searched his locker, they found a set of unauthorized access keys that could open maintenance doors throughout the building. Lance claimed they were leftovers from an old security contractor, but Mira wasn't convinced. During his second interview, Lance revealed something he hadn't mentioned before. About 10 minutes before the alarm sounded, he said he had seen a man in a maintenance uniform near the garage's east stairwell. The man was tall, wore a cap low over his face, and carried a black duffel bag. Lance assumed he was a repair worker and thought nothing of it at the time. But when he later checked the schedule, no maintenance work had been planned for that night. The man's identity was unknown. Mira followed this lead closely. She requested the mall's maintenance employee records and found one name that stood out: Rowan Hale, a former electrician fired 6 months earlier for theft and suspected of vandalizing mall property. He had a criminal record that included break-ins, though nothing violent. Still, his access knowledge made him an ideal suspect. He would know how to bypass security systems, disable cameras, and slip through maintenance tunnels unseen. That night, Mira returned to the parking garage, walking alone through the 4th level. Her flashlight beam cut through the damp air, glinting off metal railings and puddles that reflected the dim yellow lights. She stopped by the far wall where the shadow had first appeared on the footage. A narrow service door led to an electrical corridor that ran beneath the building. It wasn't visible from the main floor, and unless someone knew it was there, it could easily be overlooked. The door was supposed to stay locked. When Mira tried the handle, it creaked open. Inside was a narrow passage filled with the hum of wiring and the faint smell of rust. The floor was dusty except for 2 faint shoe prints leading inward. They were fresh, too recent to be from anyone on her team. Her heart quickened as she followed them a few feet until they disappeared into the shadows near a utility panel. On the floor beside it lay a broken keychain shaped like a red heart, the same design Clara's sister had described her having. Mira carefully sealed the evidence bag and stepped back out into the open air. The realization settled like a stone in her stomach. Whoever had taken Clara hadn't just stumbled upon her. They had known this place intimately. Someone had studied the garage's layout, its cameras, its blind spots. Someone who had reason to return. Later, when she reviewed her findings, Mira couldn't shake the thought that the killer might have been closer than anyone believed. The call to Ethan, the missing maintenance worker, the access routes only a few knew existed. It all pointed to a pattern, deliberate and patient. She stared at the red heart keychain on her desk and wrote one line beneath her notes. The shadows in the garage belonged to someone who knew how to vanish. The case, once simple, had just grown far darker. 2 weeks after the discovery of Clara Devine's phone, the investigation took a turn no one saw coming. The days had grown colder in Riverview, the rain now replaced by a biting wind that swept through the empty levels of the Henderson Plaza garage. Detective Mira Coulson stood beneath the harsh fluorescent lights once more, staring at the spot where Clara's car had been found. The sound of distant traffic echoed faintly through the open sides of the structure. Something about the space still felt alive with secrets. Every footstep she took seemed to stir the air with the memory of that night. Forensic reports arrived that morning, and they changed everything. DNA samples taken from the car's door handle and interior didn't match Ethan Ward or Lance Hooper. The results came back linked to an unidentified male profile, one already in the state's database. When the lab emailed the match, Mira read the name twice to be sure. Rowan Hale, the former mall electrician who had been fired months earlier for theft. His personnel file contained a note from mall management describing him as unreliable and confrontational. But there was no mention of violence. Still, he knew every inch of the mall's wiring system, including how to disrupt the cameras and lighting on specific floors. Detectives obtained a warrant for his last known address. It was a small apartment above a mechanic's shop near the industrial district. When they arrived, the door was unlocked. Inside, the place was stripped bare. No furniture, no personal belongings, only the faint smell of gasoline and damp wood. On the wall above the empty counter hung a faded blueprint of the Henderson Plaza electrical grid. Mira felt a chill run down her spine. The paper was marked with circles drawn in red ink, each one matching a location where the cameras had glitched over the past month. Someone had been testing the system long before the night Clara disappeared. Hours later, a new lead emerged. A construction worker who had been renovating a warehouse near the highway reported seeing a man matching Rowan's description coming and going late at night. Police raided the warehouse that same evening. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the smell of metal. Under a tarp near the back wall, they found a duffel bag filled with stolen electronics, phones, wallets, and small devices. At first glance, it looked like evidence of petty theft. But deeper inside the bag were items that froze everyone in place. Clara's hospital ID badge, her missing watch, and a key ring engraved with her initials. It was undeniable now. Rowan Hale had been involved. The discovery was enough to issue a statewide alert for his arrest. But when police searched for his vehicle, they came up empty. Neighbors said they'd last seen him a few days before Clara vanished, loading boxes into a dark SUV. That same model of SUV had appeared on the garage cameras the night of the murder, parked a few levels below Clara's car. The realization tightened the investigation like a noose. Then, just as the hunt for Rowan intensified, another discovery shifted the case once again. Early one morning, firefighters responded to a call about a car fire in a wooded area 15 miles outside town. The vehicle was unrecognizable, completely burned out, its metal frame warped and blackened. Investigators traced the VIN number and confirmed it belonged to Ethan Ward. The man who had claimed innocence, who had cooperated at every turn, was now missing. The fire appeared deliberate. Inside the vehicle's ashes, detectives found traces of accelerant and buried under melted debris, a wallet partially intact. Inside the charred leather was an ID card belonging to Rowan Hale. The find created a chilling puzzle. Had Ethan killed Rowan and tried to destroy the evidence, or had Rowan staged the scene to make it look that way? The possibilities twisted the investigation into knots. Mira reviewed the evidence again and again, looking for logic among the contradictions. If Rowan was alive, he had gone to great lengths to disappear. If he was dead, someone else was finishing what he started. Either way, Clara's fate remained uncertain. Her body had never been found, and without it, no one could be sure exactly what had happened that night. As night fell, Mira sat in her car outside the garage, staring up at the flickering lights of the 4th level. Rain began to fall again, gentle at first, then harder, like the sky was erasing the world one drop at a time. In the reflection on her windshield, she saw the ghostly shimmer of the garage, the place where a woman vanished. A man burned, and another hunted both of them from the dark. Mira whispered to herself. Though no one was there to hear, they were all connected. And deep down she knew the truth. This was no random act. It was a chain reaction, carefully set in motion by someone who had planned everything long before the first car ever pulled into the garage. The storm that began with Clara Devine was far from over. It was only gathering force. Months passed, and Riverview moved with a cautious rhythm, its once bustling mall now quieter than ever. The parking garage stood half empty, wrapped in a kind of uneasy silence. The story of Clara Devine's disappearance had faded from headlines, but not from memory. People avoided the 4th level altogether, some out of fear, others out of superstition. At night, the security lights flickered and hummed, and the wind whistled through the open sides of the structure like a whisper that never ended. The town had grown used to the unease, but Detective Mira Coulson never stopped working the case. It lingered in her mind like an unfinished sentence. Then, in early spring, a phone call shattered the quiet. A fisherman on the banks of the Riverview River reported finding a body tangled in a chain near the shoreline. The current had carried it miles from town. Mira drove to the scene, the cold wind slicing through the morning air. The river was swollen from recent rain, its surface rippling like broken glass. When the divers pulled the body to shore, even after months in the water, they could still make out fragments of clothing and the faint outline of a man's face. The medical ID found in his jacket pocket confirmed it. Ethan Ward was dead. The scene was grim. His wrists were bound tightly with rope, and a heavy chain had been fastened to his ankles, ensuring he would sink. Whoever had done it had wanted to make sure he never resurfaced. But the strangest detail wasn't the chain. It was what the divers found tucked inside his coat pocket. A plastic sealed note, the ink smudged but still legible. The message was short and haunting. She shouldn't have known. The handwriting was analysed and quickly matched to Rowan Hale. The discovery confirmed what Mira had long suspected. Rowan was still alive. He had killed Ethan, just as he had killed Clara. The realization brought no comfort, only the heavy truth that she was chasing a man who knew how to vanish. Every time she thought she was close, he slipped away like smoke. Investigators searched the riverbank for more evidence. For days they combed through the mud and reeds, hoping for another clue. Maybe something that would lead to Clara's remains. They found nothing. Still, Mira believed Rowan's words meant something. She shouldn't have known. Known what? What had Clara discovered that made her a target? The answer had to be hidden somewhere in the tangled history of the Henderson Plaza Mall. Returning to the mall's archives, Mira revisited old files, permits, and maintenance records. That's when she noticed a detail that everyone had missed. 6 months before Clara vanished, the same period when Rowan Hale was fired, there had been a series of thefts from the mall's data storage systems. Employee information, customer credit card records, and security logs had all been compromised. The culprit had never been caught. Clara, who occasionally worked hospital overtime shifts in the mall's attached clinic, might have stumbled onto the evidence. Maybe she saw something she wasn't supposed to. Piece by piece, the puzzle began to make sense. Rowan had been running an identity theft ring using stolen data. Clara's discovery threatened to expose him. She called Ethan for help that night, thinking she could trust him. But Ethan had already been involved, likely blackmailed into assisting Rowan after realizing what was happening. When Clara confronted him, Rowan intervened, silencing her before she could speak a word to police. Ethan became the next liability, and Rowan eliminated him too, erasing every thread that could tie him back to the crimes. A month later, a tip led authorities to a small coastal town several hundred miles away. A man using a fake ID had been working at a marina under the name Gavin Ross. The description matched Rowan perfectly. Local police arrested him without incident. During questioning, he confessed to everything: tampering with the cameras, abducting Clara, burning Ethan's car. But when asked where Clara's body was, he smiled and refused to answer. "She's somewhere quiet," he said, "where it always rains." That was all he gave them. The case officially closed with Rowan's conviction, but it brought no peace. Clara's body was never found. Her family placed a memorial near the garage's 4th level, a simple plaque with her name and the words, "Gone but not forgotten." Some nights, the security guards swore they heard faint footsteps near that spot long after closing. Others said they heard a car alarm echoing softly, even when no vehicles were nearby. For Detective Mira Coulson, the sound was a reminder that some mysteries never end. They simply linger, waiting. The truth had been uncovered, the killer caught, but the absence of a body kept the story alive in whispers. On rainy nights, when she drove past the old parking garage, Mira always slowed her car and looked toward the 4th level. The lights still flickered, the shadows still shifted, and sometimes, in the blur of the rain, it almost looked like someone was standing there, waiting to go home.